Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. As I said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and you can say where you're joining us from and make sure to keep your mic muted for the reading. We have closed captions in English, so you can clearly hear the beautiful poetry that we're about to hear today. Catherine Jagoe is an award-winning British-American writer and translator whose poems have been featured on the Writer's Almanac and Poetry Daily. Her previous poetry collections include Bloodroot, News from the North, and Casting Off. Her nonfiction has received a Pushcart Prize and a citation in Best American Essays. She is a contributor to Wisconsin Public Radio's Wisconsin Life series. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Kelsay Books, for publishing this work, and thank you, Olivia, for turning out on a Sunday to host it. Really appreciate that. And thank you, whoever is out there, for turning up on a Sunday in one of the most beautiful months of the year. It's a gorgeous day here in the American Midwest. The sun is shining, and anybody who can is outside. So if you're indoors watching this, I really appreciate your presence. I'm planning to read and talk about the book for about half an hour, and then I'd like to open it up to questions and comments, and also very open to requests. If there's something that, if you already have the book and there's a poem that you particularly like and didn't hear and would like to hear, I'm really happy to read it. And I'm also really interested in anything that puzzles you. Is there a line or a poem that you'd like to know more about, you didn't quite get? Those are always really useful things to know for having a discussion. So all right, so I'll just move into talking about the book and reading you some poems. So this book arose out of, I would say, two circumstances, and the smaller of the two, even though it's huge, was the pandemic. And even though we live in a small Midwestern city, we, like all of us, our lives were changed during that time, but we were lucky enough to have not very draconian pandemic restrictions, so we were able to walk outside the home whenever we wanted to, which is not true, I know, for people in the large cities and people in Britain and Europe at certain times. So we got in the habit of walking twice a day, doing the same loop twice a day, every day, for many, many months. And I really became aware of our home surroundings in a way that I never had before during that time. You really start noticing the small day-to-day changes in the plant life and the bird life and the insect life around us. And another piece of the book was a collaboration with a friend of mine who's a absolutely phenomenally gifted birder. He birds by ear. He's also a nature photographer and an amateur entomologist. And birding the first year of the pandemic was not good because we were all still figuring out how we were going to go birding with masks on. And this person, whose name is Mike McDowell, spent a lot of his time that first summer of the pandemic photographing insects, a lot of them very, very small insects in Madison and the local area in Wisconsin. He's kept a blog for many years and posted his insect and bird and flower and other nature photography on that. And for a few years, I've been really stunned at the kind of jewels of photography that he produces, and had said several times to him, I really think some of this should be in a book. And so one of the projects I started during the pandemic was writing poems in response to some of his insect poems, which really surprised me because I think humans in general, myself included, have generally a really bad relationship with insects. And, you know, we either ignore them or we try and get rid of them. And we know very little about them, even though they are so crucial. But the title of the book came to me when I was watching him one time. He was down on a beach by the Wisconsin River and photographing these tiger beetles, which is one of the creatures he's really passionate about. And as I watched him taking the photographs, the phrase came to me, he's praying to the God of small things. Because of his position, he was down on his knees with his elbows resting on the sand in kind of what looked like a Muslim prayer position to get his shots. And clearly I was channeling Arundhati Roy's novel title from the 1990s, The God of Small Things, although I didn't realize that at the time. But the phrase really stuck with me, and I kept writing and sort of collecting poems around that theme of small creatures. And then the larger context for the book is this terrible grief and anxiety that haunts so many of us about what's happening, what we humans are doing to the climate, to places, and to biodiversity and species, which are all suffering terrible losses ever since basically going back to the Industrial Revolution, but very strongly during my lifetime of 50 plus years, which is when something called the Great Acceleration happened. And I was part of that. I flew all over the place, flew back and forth from the United States to Britain and Spain, and, you know, contributed to my carbon footprint. So I realized that the sense of that sight is really important to this book, because we can't save what we don't care about, and we can't care about what we don't see. And so I just started collecting poems, some of which I had already written and some of which I was writing during this time, about small creatures, not only insects, but other creatures too. And I'm going to start with actually a big poem, and not about a small creature. It's at this book, this poem actually closes the book, and it's called Praise Song for a Plane Tree. I've used the English word for that tree, which in America is called an American sycamore. And I'm going to show you some images. What you're seeing on the screen there is the cover of the book, and I was lucky enough to have to find an image online of some fabric art, this beautiful quilt that was created by Holly Knott, and she was creating a quilt that was based on a tree that's not in our neighborhood, but in Pennsylvania. She lives in Massachusetts. And it's an enormous tree, and any of you that are familiar with American sycamores or plane trees will know that they have this very unusual bark that sort of scales off, that it peels off as the tree grows, and that the upper limbs are really white, and the lower limbs have all this kind of mottled appearance. And this also came out of the pandemic in a different way. I took a poetry course with an amazing poet and teacher of poetry, Nicole Brown, called The Kingdom of Green, and our assignment was to choose a tree somewhere in our neighborhood and visit it every day for as long as possible for a period of 6 weeks, at different times of day or night in different weathers, and spend as much time as possible. So I did actually do that for 6 weeks during one of those pandemic years. And this tree is about a 5-minute walk from our house, and it was planted under the direction of Aldo Leopold, who's the founder of wildlife ecology and conservation in the US, and did much of his work in Wisconsin in the 1930s and 40s. So here's the first part. Praise song for a plane tree. Heart stopper, thunder striker, piebald tree with the alabaster arms. Already you are ancient. Even when young, you were in tatters. You were husked, scabbed, leprous, healed and healing, a fortress in a sea of white snake root. Like the brindled cat who visits every day, you are chestnut and taupe, dun and umber, antelope, parchment, bone marrow, pith. You tell me to be at peace with many names, many skins, many strata, to be a jumble of jigsaw pieces, none of which fit, although all do. Teach me to be pregnant with myself, my own becoming, to bear stretch marks, striations, moving tectonic plates, to slough myself piecemeal day by day and never look back. Teach me to be sinuous, how to change direction, go baroque when constrained by the press of others. Teach me that growth means shedding, loss, so many daily losses. It means standing shocked and naked to the world, exposed to view, but without shame, because aren't we all dying? Aren't we all beautiful? Tree, speak to me in blotch and mottle, dapple and dark light. Arrest me, gentle me, teach me to breathe. Teach me also to be stubborn when ravaged by hungry mouths, to cultivate hope every spring in the face of blight, new shoots withering to witches' brooms. Show me the ways my cracks will be secured with spider silk, its lattice work of light. Wind tree oceaning, earth anchored hub and hold fast. Teach me wind shimmer, wind seed, how to be wind blown. Rain cedar, whisperer, heat shield me, hearten and relieve me, shade me, tent me, nestle me unseen at your muscled roots, brawny as hawsers. Endear me to you, who are my kith and kin. Conceal me, heal me, cleanse me, you, my commonweal, my commonwealth, your breath, my breath. Bide your sweet Cretacean time, abide with me. School me in survival. Teach me to broaden, deepen, keep on reaching for the light. Oh, forbearer, forgive my oblivion. Outlast, outlive me. One of the things I discovered during that time observing the tree was just how many lives, small and microscopic and not so small, were tied to it. How many creatures visited it, lived in it, underneath it, on it, and around it. And another, in a way, that tree helped ground me at a really difficult time. I was not able to visit my mother for several years during the pandemic, and she was increasingly frail and indeed, coming close to dying. And I discovered during the research that I did on a tree that the tree would have germinated in 1936, which was the year my mother was born. I also became aware that the tree was slightly sick. It had a witch's broom, a fungal disease, and somehow those two facts became intertwined for me in a kind of inexplicable but spiritual way. The tree certainly helped me through that time. I'm going to go on. Olivia, could you fast forward the images through to the next slide?
You're screen sharing, so just click on the right-hand side on your slideshow.
Yeah. Just fast forward. No, what am I doing wrong?
There might be like an arrow button.
There we go. Okay, so that's a detail of the tree, and that is the tree without any words on it. Here's a poem about childhood. It's called At 10. Lumpy, earnest, and short-sighted. Often it was only the small that consoled me in those years of schoolyard cruelties, things that I could get close to. The freckled throats of foxgloves, snapdragons' soft jaws, liverwort on the stream bank, oozing and slippery with life. Birch bark curls where I'd inscribe a favorite word. Moonstone, say, or rosehip, tendril. Tadpole sprouting limbs, graceless and strange as my own expanding, elongating body with its bracken-stained knees. The crushable nubs of pineapple weed in pavement cracks, and bluebells in the woods, their scent and music, every stem bent by the weight of tiny bells, whose wild, sweet witchery still haunts me. And one day, that most pedestrian of miracles, donning the ugly, dreaded glasses, government-issued brown plastic, and the wonderment of seeing every single tree had leaves. I know that is a very pedestrian miracle, but it remains a miracle nevertheless. And I became so aware during the pandemic of how trees are connected to breath. I mean, they literally help recycle and produce the oxygen that we need to stay alive. So they became kind of more than just background to me. This image that you're seeing is of a yellow warbler, which is a small migratory bird that comes through Wisconsin in May on its way up north, and returns back through in September. They winter in South and Central America in the mangrove forests in Bolivia and Peru, and they breed from Mexico to the Arctic Circle. When I was learning to bird, this was an important little creature to me. They're tiny. They're like all warblers. They're only about 5 inches long, and they make these incredible migrations. So I wrote a poem to this bird. It's called Self-Portrait as a Yellow Warbler, after Amy Netsukamatatu, who has a series of self-portrait poems in her book Oceanic. And it's kind of a love poem to a willow thicket, which if you're a yellow warbler who's migrating is very important. And it's also based on the work of Donald Kreutzmer in a book called The Singing Life of Birds, and he showed that migratory birds encounter actual dialects or accents across their migratory range, because different birds who stay in where they are have slightly different ways of singing. Even though it's the same song, it's a little different. And I was really taken with that notion of accents, because accents is such an important part of my own life as a migrant myself between two continents. So here's the poem: Self-Portrait as Yellow Warbler. Let me glimpse your green shadows at dawn, tender cover. Shield me close in your shimmering thicket. I'm faint, famished, and dying to flit in your catkins, Sally gleaning to feast on your bugs. Look for me always near water, sun splinter. I was born to this northern light, and it reeled me back between worlds. I left after dusk, alone, one of millions. I've flown thousands of miles, all at night. Ask me about the gulfs I've covered, the accents I've acquired. When I beg for more sweet, lavish me with larvae, soused on honeysuckle scent. These blood streaks on my chest, I'm still healing, will always bear scars. I could nest in your crotch, your strong, steady stems, proffer you my cup, raise at last my brood. And now I'm going to read you a series of poems about insects, which is from the middle section of the book. And I was, thanks to Kelsay, able to include some of Mike McDowell's photos that went with these poems and inspired them. And these little creatures that you're seeing are a pair of mating red milkweed beetles who prefer milkweed. And their Latin name is Tetraopes tetrathalamus, which means basically four eyes, and you will see that reflected in the poem. The poem's called The Lovers. What are you looking at? You jealous or what? Piss off and leave us alone. You can call us four eyes all you want. It no longer stings. We found each other. We're the colors of love and death especially. We ate roots all winter to survive, rebirthed ourselves in earthen chambers, severed the veins of toxic sap upstream before tucking in. We haunt scrubland and verges, looking for milkweed's stout, rebellious stems, those few not yet rounded up like all the others. If you only knew to listen, you might hear us purr. And that is not a figure of speech. There are recordings of the sounds, communications that these little beetles make, and they do actually purr. You can hear recordings of them if you go searching online. The next poem is about a small autumn dragonfly called the cherry-faced meadowhawk, and with a name like that, who can resist writing a poem? They're, like all dragonflies, really beautiful. But as I said, these particular ones in the area where we live in Wisconsin are October. They appear in October and maybe sometimes into November. Cherry-faced meadowhawk. Small carnivore soaking up late sun. Is that a ruby or a blood spot on your wings? As our north world tilts toward the dark, You weave air and gold October light with your scarlet spindle, your slim wand that spun and spun inimitable spells through eons of lost time. Primeval aviator, here before the birds, before the dinosaurs. Your stigmata are not wounds, but mystic marks of grace. You snatch your few short weeks of bliss, fighting and mating on the wing. Trapeze artist, decked in cherry goggles, while the leaves loose and release themselves. Locusts, ochre minnows, ashes, wine dark ovals. October with all its losses. Trees, great galleons ablaze, while all along the globe spins and spins around the sun, regardless of the gouts of blood, canary, flame, the flocks of leaves scudding and drifting like snow that's all too soon to come. Meantime, you bask in the slant sun's last life-giving sweetness as I feast upon your fire engine red, infuse it into my bones to tide me through. And for those of you who don't live in Wisconsin, the winter, even with climate warming, is still very long and hard and cold. So that blaze of color in the insect world and the tree world is incredibly precious for us. Let's see. Here's another little creature for you. This is a peacock fly, and you know, it's maybe the size of a grain of rice. And this is one of the many insects that I realized were quite common thanks to this photographer friend who posted his pictures and started showing me where these creatures are. And I realized that all of them have been all around me all these decades that I've been here. I just never knew where to look, never knew what I was looking for. But now I see them everywhere. And I was just so struck by how exquisite this little creature is. And as I did research on it, they do these amazing things with their wings where they kind of do a kind of semaphore to communicate with each other as part of the mating ritual. It's called peacock fly. Tiny peacock strutting your stuff on a rotten log. Dear smidgen of stonefish, dear bug-eyed fleck of animate female granite encrusted with creekbed crud and sequined in sapphires. Your courtship dance is entrancing the male you have your eye on, bejeweled like you and doing semaphore with his matching patchwork fans as he does. The two of you, gender equity eaters of detritus, mutual choosers of mates. May the wrens and the tanagers spare you today till the dance is done and your eggs are laid, that the dance may go on. And this weird and wonderful little creature is the nymph, the non-adult form of the buffalo tree hopper. And thanks to Mike, I discovered that there are tree hoppers, leaf hoppers, and plant hoppers, and there are many, many varieties of them, and they're all around us. The title of this poem is Nymph. I was just struck by the notion of a nymph as a name for a stage of insect life, and particularly this little creature when I first saw it with its weird looking sprouts, and reminded me for some reason of Hamlet, the play Hamlet, which I used to be somewhat obsessed with as a teenager. And there's a line where Hamlet, who's being as usual rude and sarcastic to Ophelia, sees her walking by, looking down, and he says to her, "Nymph, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered." Orisons being an older word for prayer. So, "Nymph, in thy prayers be all my sins remembered." And I started thinking about my own sins in relation to insects. Nymph. Tree sprite, sap sipper, wood shrimp, locust lover, of one substance with the green you feast on. Weird wee beastie with twin rows of saplings sprouting from your back. Striped translucence, sky-facing embryonic bison at your inscrutable and beautiful orations. Pray for the remission of my sins, my miniature insectageddons. That plastic gallon of pyrethrin that I sprayed around our one small cherry tree to slay the bronze green shielded beetles busily devouring its leaves. And after, noticing the bee balm full of honeybees below. The ant killer I still dole out in viscous globs of murderous ambrosia they flock to, thinking it a gift, signaling each other, pressing shoulder to shoulder in a ring to feed. The can of foaming wasp and hornet killer that I bought, shamed, knowing what I did, and coward that I was, aimed the nozzle at a mud dauber's nest from 20 feet away. The hiss, fizz, jet of extinguishment. The hive hum silenced in a second. Only the scent of evil on the air, and after, the sound of pale foam dripping floorwards from the porch ceiling. All the quiet dead enshrouded in it. This is an acorn weevil. And just look at this amazing long rostrum it has, which is specially designed to drill into an acorn. And this, the poem itself, I don't know if you can see it, it's shaped like an acorn. And I should just warn you that there is a 4-letter word in this poem, so I apologize if that offends anyone. Acorn weevil. Midsummer high on the tree, your mother, freshly fucked, strokes a young green acorn with her dowsing rod antenna, divines the precise spot, saws a pinhead circle through the pericarp with the blades on her exquisitely curved rostrum, quaffs the kernel's rich oil, and then drills deep, steady and deep, reaching up to her hilt into its oaken heart. Turning, she posts a pearled egg down the shaft, plugs it with dung to disguise it. Oh, to be bounded in a nutshell, your orb, your ark, your abbey, feasting on the fruit of the tree, the nut, your nursery, and you curled, creamy, nestled, nuzzling, gnawing, your dark secret love ecstatic. Come fall the acorn, your larder fortress falls. Together, you never fall far from the tree. Percussion of impact, your cue to chew a hatch out of the hold, then wriggle, struggle your pillowy amplitude effortfully through. You have ballooned after all that eating. Tumble onto oak leaf duff and grub down into the soil at the tree's roots to drowse, dream, dissolve, and recast yourself for years. 1, 2, 5, till one warm day you stir, clamber out, lift your unused elytra, unfold your long tool wings, still creased with newness, and fly up to the tree from which you came to begin again. And the word elytra, if you're not familiar with it, means wing cases. So the on the back of the weevil, those are actually cases that can lift off and reveal wings. This is an image of a beautiful little creature called red-banded leafhopper, which I now regularly see in my yard and on my milkweed plants, but again, had never imagined existed until I saw Mike's photographs and until he showed me where to look for them. And this poem is called Leafhopper Search, and it was, I guess, inspired by the fact that every time I chose an insect that I wanted to respond to with a poem and started researching it online, it didn't matter what the insect was. The first thing that Google gave me was a list of ways to kill that creature. So this poem is a poem in two voices, and usually when I perform it, I have somebody come and read it with me, because I've used the typography to show the different voices. One is in a light gray, which is one voice threaded through, and the other one is black. And so I will have to attempt to show the difference between the two voices by myself. Leafhopper Search. Link. Look closer. A common. What are leafhoppers and how do I get rid of them? Milkweed leaf holds you. Sliver. Are leafhoppers good or bad? Of cerulean slashed with scarlet. Do leafhoppers bite humans? Bright as a tropical fish or hyacinth. Are leafhoppers invasive? Macaw. But no exotic. Perfectly at home. Perfect. Are leafhoppers toxic? Innocuous to plants and beasts. What repels leafhoppers? You unspeech me. Such profligate color. How do I keep leafhoppers off my plants? In your speck of life, such consummate. What kills leafhoppers organically? Design. Why? How? And what? Will soapy water kill leafhoppers in the wild? What is the best insecticide to kill leafhoppers? Have I been doing? Will nix what's pestering you? Not to have known how to get rid of leafhoppers in 4 simple steps. You till now. We recently rented a cabin up in northern Wisconsin in Door County, and when we arrived at the cabin, there was a note from an exterminator who obviously we had not arranged for, that the owner of the cottage did, that said, you'll see a lot of spiders running around, all dead in a couple of hours. And then that same day, I think we went out for a walk, and we came across a man with a can of Raid insecticide, spraying it on his milkweeds in his back garden, in his yard. So, you know, we humans, we just don't stop killing things automatically. And the Google voice in that poem, all of those sentences were what came up. They're not my words. They were all commands, prompts that came up in Google when I searched for red-banded leafhopper. Okay, one last. So I did sort of started with a long true poem, and then I've done a series of shorter insect poems. I wanted to end with a long poem. And this one was inspired by a visit to an exhibit by a British photographer called Levon Biss, and he created this exhibit, Microsculpture, the Insect Portraits of Levon Biss, which is now also published as a book, but it's available if you just Google him online. And he, this is a really extraordinary project, because he took insects, specimens from the Oxford Museum of Natural History, and applied kind of art photography and microscope photography to them. And for each insect portrait that he created, he took about, I think it was 8,000, 8,000 photos of different cross sections or segments of the body, using microscopic lens, and then compiled those thousands of images over a course of several weeks to create one portrait that appears on a black background. And they are, when they're displayed, they're really impactful, because some of them are 9 feet high. They're really large. This exhibit has been traveling around the world since 2016, and it came to our one of the public libraries in our area in Verona, Wisconsin last year. And one of the images in particular, a piece of description that he added about the photograph that he used of a flying saucer trench beetle, inspired this poem that's a long poem, but it's in segments. It's called The Fog Harvesters, and it's after an image of a flying saucer trench beetle by Levon Biss in his microsculpture exhibit. Snagged in my mind like flotsam on river willows at high water, the beetles of the Namib Desert, who live on less than half an inch of rain a year. On nights when fog rolls in from the skeleton coast, flying saucer trench beetles dig tiny trenches on the slip face of dunes, slurp dew pearls that gather on the ridges. Others, the darklings, station themselves in downward dog, basking, heads down in the sand, backs facing up into the fog-bearing wind, to sip slow condensation as it trickles down their elytra to their mouths. Snagged or smashed on the summer windscreens of our childhood, when did it stop? Hundreds of dancing insects interrupted. That golden air, the emptying air, the ever more empty air. At the Crane Zoo, all the world's 15 species of crane are gathered in separate pens on restored prairie, labeled vulnerable, threatened, or critically endangered. Early August and all the native grassland plants are blooming. But in 2 hours, we see only 3 butterflies, 1 cabbage white, 1 swallowtail, 1 monarch. Some moths have sound receptors tuned to the pitch of bats' hunting screams, can hear them from 30 yards and take evasive action. Bumblebees, there are 24 species in Wisconsin, like to nest in chipmunk burrows. Is this ode or elegy? 1/4 of the creatures on the planet is a beetle. Nabokov, compulsive lepidopterist, wrote, "I confess I do not believe in time." He thought the world so full of butterflies and moths, a continuous shimmer of wings when he was young, would always be so. Loved their death spasms, the satisfying crackle of pin-penetrating thorax, each specimen lusted after, hunted, mounted. Sometimes, he says, I caught the subtle perfume of butterfly wings on my hands, a perfume that varies with the species. It may be vanilla or lemon or musk. So many shared his greed, his kink, children let loose in paradise with nets and killing jars. This island is infested with Brazilians, the old man said, by which he meant overrun with vermin, by which he meant swarming like insects, like roaches, by which he meant teeming with aliens, by which he meant invasives. Invasive, that's us. We're the invasives. Yet every image Levon Bis creates derives from unimaginable attention. In other words, a kind of tenderness. For each, he took 8,000 portraits of a single corpse from the Oxford Museum of Natural History, which holds over 7 million insect specimens from every country in the world. Darwin, Wallace, all the great Victorian collectors' loot is stored there. Records of prelapsarian abundance. I will never visit the Namib Desert, but the thought of those beetles milking the fog, what can I say? Earth is inconceivably plural, and the fog, those few nights it arrives, must taste something like mercy. So that is the end of the poems that I had selected to read to you, but I would love to hear questions or requests or reactions. And Olivia, you'll have to say how people will do that today.
Sure, feel free to use the raise hand feature under reactions. I see we have like a heart react in the chat, so use that reactions button in the bottom ribbon on the right hand side of your screen. You can raise your hand to be called on. You can just unmute yourself and, you know, get Catherine's attention. Yeah, go ahead and feel free.
Let's see.
Catherine, I'm in utter awe of the celebratory, your poetry's celebratory communion with nature. I think it's something that too few poets do, I think. I do it to some extent, so I can really identify with that, but I really found that very, very interesting. A beautiful presentation as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. I think, I mean, one thing that I wanted to say is that even though this book comes from a place of such grief about what's happening and what we're doing to the environment, and that hope is also really important, and that there has to be room for wonder as well as grief, because that's, you know, if we're not saving things because we don't care about them and we can't see them, that's where poets and writers and artists come in. Like, you know, Mary Oliver said, I think it was like, I don't know what a prayer is. I don't exactly know what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. And I think, you know, all writers do pay attention, but particularly poets. And that attention is a form of love and is a form of communication. So that's my hope.
Hi,
Okay.
Catherine. Hi, Catherine. It's Isabel here.
Hi, Isabel.
Hi. I wondered if you would possibly read May Day Manifesto, because that's my favourite one.
Sure. Let's see. I'll find it first.
Made a reservation.
There it is. Yeah, this was written 1 year in the wake of well, in spring migration, if you're a birder, it's really exhausting because you can't bear to miss a single day, because the birds fly at night and they arrive, you know, they're arriving in the morning. So your best chance of seeing them is really early in the morning, like 6. And all birders get totally exhausted after several weeks of this, and it goes on for several weeks. So this was kind of a count. It was sort of a manifesto of like, let's just not panic and enjoy what this moment is. The other piece to know is that May is when the weather just, you know, we've been through months and months of a brutal Midwestern winter, and May is when the world turns beautiful again. And so here's May Day and Manifesto. Let the planting wait, and the scrubbing and raking and weeding. Let no mulch be applied. Let the lawns not be mowed. Let the sweet grass flower for once. Let no beds be dug. Let earth do what it will. Let exams be unwritten, untaken, ungraded. Let the files be unopened, the emails unanswered, the folders stay folded. Let's shed all our backpacks and burdens. Let our backs be unstooped and our stoops be much sat on. Let's grow fat and fecund. Let wanton and wild be law. Let's saunter and loiter. Let's hail our neighbours and note how we're all a shade older. Let's linger on sidewalks in small talk. Let's inhale the air with abandon, take long swigs of lilac. Let crabapple trees leave us speechless. Let's stroke their dark bark, press our faces to blossom. Let's remember how long we have waited for this. Let moles follow their noses. Let the chipmunks refashion their chambers. Let the robins and wrens raise their young. Let redwings take over the world. Let weeds sprout from the cracks in the concrete. The fox feast on chicken. The coyotes roam and guffaw. Let the orioles weave their pendular nests way up high, darting and flashing. Let the redstarts be raucous and various. Let the young maple put out its leaves and grow tall. Let its taproot grow deep. Let the fern fronds uncoil into plumes. Let ants trace the turgid, rotund buds of peonies, sucking their sap. Let heat come and rain. Let magnolias drop all their clothes. Let's stand still and listen, just listen, trying to name every song. When I started birding, and I'm trying to do that, thanks to the guidance of way better birders than I, but that notion of there are suddenly in May, as all of these migrants come through and returners return, suddenly the air is full of all of these voices that weren't there for months, and that's just such a joy and excitement at that time, that month. Okay, Dave and Kathy, looks like you
Yeah, hi. Really, really, really like the poems, Catherine. And just a small comment, but we particularly liked the front cover of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, which went with the first poem. And we like that bit where you said the jigsaw pieces didn't fit together, and yet they all fitted together. Or it was something like that. I thought that worked really well. So thanks very much.
Yeah, it was a bit like the self-portrait poem of kind of feeling a kind of kinship with the tree, that all of us are made up of all these pieces that don't fit but that do fit. Not just me, obviously, but all of us. And so yeah, I spent a lot of time sitting with that tree and looking at all the bits of bark of different kinds and shapes and colors that were dropped on the ground all around me, and all the creatures that came and went, and the birds that used the tree. And the most scary time actually was being there at night, because this tree is in Madison, Wisconsin, on Arbor Drive, just off of Monroe Street, and it's on the edge of a residential street. So when I was there at night, I always had this slight fear of, like, an axe murder or something, but I was hidden by the plants, which were high enough. And one night there was this crackling on the ground of creatures, or a large creature moving across all the bits of bark, and I had this kind of slash of fear, and I just like breathed and sat there. And then against the moonlight, I saw a whole family of raccoons moving into the moonlight, and they were silhouetted, and they climbed up a cedar tree that's opposite, and I saw all of the parents and then all the little ones going up the tree, and realized that all of these creatures are woven into the fabric of the world of the tree.
Can we buy the book in the UK?
You should be able to. It's available on Amazon, and you could also ask your local bookstores to order it. It's available on Ingram, who are a book distributor. I think, Olivia, you should be able to answer that question. I'm sure you have it.
Yeah, so I don't think Kelsay Books is on Ingram. They're on Ingram Spark, but we use a print-on-demand publishing model, so we get our books sent from a distributor, and that's why we have authors order a certain quantity, so you can buy directly from our web store or directly from the author, and it takes a typical amount of time to ship within and from the United States, within the United States, and we also ship internationally. So yeah, that's why we use our online store for poets all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, I know, yeah, you can go to Kelsay Books website and order it directly from them.
I'll post the link again as well in the chat.
Great. It's also available on Amazon, but I don't know how that works if people in the UK, if anybody in the UK has bought it on Amazon or.
Hi, I've bought it in the UK. Hi, Catherine, from Amazon, and yes, it's just I'd much rather buy it in a bookstore, but it is available through Amazon in the UK.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks.
And thanks, it's been brilliant. Thanks very much. It's been a wonderful reading, and I love the range of the poems, and I love like you said, the minutiae of small, but then you have a wonderful way of making that much, much bigger. And your use of language is just so beautiful. So thank you.
Very nice to you. Thank you. Does anybody, I'm sure there must be things in the poems that don't always make sense. I'm really happy to try and elucidate any points that people were puzzled by, but hard to do if you haven't read the book yet, obviously. So
Catherine, I don't know if you can hear me, but it's Roz, your sister. I'm just saying it was gorgeous reading. Thank you very much. It's brilliant. I've put a little something in the messages
Okay.
saying that, yes, I think there is hope because about your message and the fact that we need to make people much more aware of how important all of these little creatures are and how they weave our environment together. And that is a message of hope. That's what I see that as. And it's made me, I'm going to go away and start doing much more looking at insects actually and tell my family about them. So there you are. That straight away. But yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you very much. It's lovely. And I'm sorry you can't see me, but anyway, I'm sending lots of love.
And I know it's late in the UK now, must be 9 o'clock over, gone 9 o'clock, so yeah.
Yes, but I'm really glad that we've listened in. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I believe we wanted to keep this to about an hour, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. But nobody has to rush out of here. Feel free to stick around and chat.
Yeah, I'll